Hey guys, welcome back to Predictapalooza. In this installment we are going to be powering up our third rebuilt Predicta. This is actually the first one that I pulled the main board on and restuffed before moving on to the rest. And now I'm circling back and we're going to work on the chassis. Now this is a set that I nicknamed the Bent Neck Princess because, well, it's got a bit of a problem. It was damaged in shipping, and the CRT head unit neck mounting collar swivel thing was bent. It's actually cast aluminum and it got bent. But otherwise the set survived. I do not recommend shipping these sets. I got a tip online. This was listed on an auction site. There were no bids. It was a reasonable price, so I bid on it. I won. Minimal packing, but the picture tube is good. I was able to get a raster. I showed it in an earlier video when I first got it. So on the positive side, everything's here. All the knobs are present. The back. The internals are in pretty good shape. There's just a little bit of corrosion here and there, but we even have the original linearity control that I do believe is still good. This set's a little bit different than the others, though, or at least it will be in the long run, because this is the only one in this batch that has some major cabinet issues. There is rusting and pitting and paint loss all over, so eventually this will get stripped, sanded, filler where needed, primer, and I'll probably paint it red. Of the original colors, that seems to be the most popular, but the hardest to find, whereas there are plenty of beige sets around. I think it'd be alright if there's one less in the world. This set's also different in that there's a UHF option. There's a separate tuner tacked in here, that copper-plated box with a tube in it. I believe it's a 6AF4. It's a UHF down converter that then feeds into the VHF tuner and then into the IF strip. That knob was missing, which is a drag, and that seems to be pretty hard to find. That seems to be often missed on these sets, which are not that common. Not that common with the UHF option. But we'll rig something up so we can play around with it. It's missing 1 foot, so it's a bit flopped over right now. We'll have to replace that. And considering that the cabinet's in bad condition, I wasn't too surprised to see that the arms and basically all the metal surfaces are a bit worse for wear. The corrosion on this, like this high voltage box, we'll just remove that, throw it in some evapor rust. No big deal. Actually, the IF shield is not too bad, all things considered. And the main chassis actually doesn't look too bad. It's just dusty. Alrighty, another Predicta ready to power up. I finished reinstalling the main board, populated with tubes, and this time I tested all the tubes and weeded out bad ones from all the sets. And it was a little disappointing that a lot of the original tubes were bad or weak. So I'll have to dig through my stash to find good tubes for all these sets. Anyways, as usual, we are powering it up without the fusible resistor first to make sure that there aren't any major wiring problems with the power distribution. And here we go. All the tubes should light up. And they are, and our current draw is about 3/4 of an amp, which seems right. And we even have the dial light glowing, or the channel indicator light glowing. Alright, everything looks stable, so let's go for it. Okay, fusible resistor has been installed. Test pattern generator hooked up and turned on. Here we go. Current's a bit higher now, 0.8 amps, 0.9, 1 amp, 1.3, or 1.25 rather. Now it's about 1.3, 1.4. It's about the same as the other sets I've restored. Let's see, do we have any sound? We have hiss. That's good. Nothing on the CRT. Let's see. I can remember how this control harness goes. There's vertical hold, horizontal hold, and brightness. And brightness is the only pot that has all three terminals connected to something. That would be this guy. Yes, we have a raster. So there's definitely crud on the inside of the CRT cover. Yeah, raster, but it's filling it up nicely. Fantastic. Let's see if I hunt around the dial, can I actually tune something in. So the tuner's working because when I change the channels, there's a reaction. Here's my test tone. Let's see. On channel 5, 3, 4. Ooh. That would be channel 5. Well, pattern's coming in pretty well. Horizontal and vertical holder off. Woohoo! Boy, that's noisy. Wow, that's the nicest image we've had so far on our first power up. Now, part of the reason may be that I did test all the tubes before I put them in, whereas in the other sets I just put whatever tubes it came with back in the set. Let's see. The sound's not so great. Let's try some of the other test patterns. Wow, linearity's really good. I did not touch the controls for that yet. Looks like maybe we got a little too much height. Vertical linearity maybe off a hair. Then we do have some distortion. Hopefully we can fix that a little bit. So this set got whacked pretty good, and in particular the CRT unit, and I can see that well, I'll show you in a bit that the CRT cover, something's, not only was the cabinet bent a little bit, the neck collar that supports this, but also something in this, because the screen cover is off a bit, and I suspect that stuff may have shifted inside, and that could be accounting for this weird curvature on the left. Wow, really nice bandwidth too. Let's see. Now, it appears I wired the contrast control backwards. Not a big deal. I'll swap the two wires. So when I go counterclockwise, I get higher contrast. That's not the way it should be. But boy, that looks really nice. Nice bright CRT too. Oof. Let's take a closer look at some things for a moment. I'll turn this off. It has one of the nicest flybacks I've seen, which makes me wonder if maybe it's even a replacement. Regardless, we have some other issues that need to be dealt with, potentially. The yoke wire has been cut and spliced for some reason. Looks like they wanted to add in some more length, like another 4 inches for some reason. The wire is really stiff and brittle, so I think eventually I'll need Well, actually, it's just the it's just the new sections that are really stiff. The original wire's rather flexible, so I'll probably want to rewire that whole thing at some point. There is some damage to the head unit, unfortunately. There's some crud on the inside that probably got knocked loose when it was handled roughly in shipping. There are stress cracks, some scuffs. Those are pretty deep scratches. That's too deep. That's not going to buff out. And then it is slightly in the visible area, which is a drag. Some nasty scratches up here, a crack. Some of the paint flaked off from the backside. But also notice how it's crooked. More of this screw is visible than that screw. I don't know what's going on there. Like the whole thing is kind of shifted this way. Might just be a matter of disassembling and putting it back together. Hopefully nothing's bent inside. And finally, the most distressing thing potentially. So this crud appears to be on the inside. Oh yeah, I can see it moving around with my finger from static electricity. There's probably some bits of dag that came off. But it appears that there is some phosphor loss. Like maybe a little bit of glass or metal became dislodged inside the CRT, and during shipping it scraped against the phosphor. Well, as soon as I started working on this head unit, some problems immediately emerged, literally, like dag coating was falling out of the neck opening here, and as soon as I started taking off this band, some chunks of plastic came away. So this definitely sustained some damage, but at least now we know we have an adhesive that will work well on this. And even if we couldn't, these aren't critical. There are a lot of ears all around the perimeter, and the bulk of them are intact, so that's alright. Well, that's not great, but it'll still work. This one broke off too, but I haven't seen the bit of it. Wow, a lot of the dag came off. Must be coming out through, I don't know where it's coming out actually. So this is kind of sealed. Must be coming out through the voids down here. Well, we can recoat the CRT. That's not a big deal. That paper label. Where'd it go? I'm accumulating quite a few of those. They seem to be falling out of every set I've worked on. I've been saving all of them. That was the note that only authorized personnel should be doing what I'm doing. Alright, here's the important thing. Does this stuff come off? I think it does. I think I see why I was being fooled by it. And I have seen this before now that I think about it. So all these flecks, where it kind of looks like it's actually on the phosphor, that's the shadow. So there are little bits of stuff on the glass that you kind of can't see because they're light colored, but they cast a larger shadow on the underlying phosphor. So let's get some glass cleaner and clean all this off, and those spots should disappear. That cleaned up beautifully. As soon as I hit it with some glass cleaner and a paper towel, it just came away spotless. No issues with the phosphor whatsoever. That's fantastic. That's the number one most important thing. A little bit of chipped plastic here and there is not going to affect their performance, and they're in invisible areas like that piece that broke off. Now, while I've got this apart and I'm going to completely disassemble it, I'm going to thoroughly clean it because this is also a bit nasty. I'm sure that's environmental from cigarette smoke, most likely. That band on the right where it was protected, that's the color it should be, or that's the color it was originally. This is cigarette smoke, most likely. Some of you have mentioned using a product like Retro Bright. I don't think that's applicable with this type of plastic. So in the vintage computer restoration world, yellowing plastic is a big deal, like a Nintendo or an Apple IIe case, that kind of thing. I believe that's because they put fire retardant chemicals in the plastic that yellow over time. This is different. This is environmental. This is from cigarette smoke, and I'm pretty darn sure. And I've had good luck with it cleaning up with just some strong cleaners like Spray 9, Simple Green, Purple Power, Fantastic, that kind of stuff. And then a bit of light polishing with some plastic polish. I've never needed to chemically try to bleach it or anything like that, and I'd be wary of it because I don't know what it might do to the plastic. So after a thorough cleaning, we'll put it back together. Now that issue with the looking like the screen cover was off kilter, I don't see anything bent down here. Might have just been that the band wasn't quite seated right or it got knocked out of place a little bit, but I was worried that the internal steel support might have been bent or something, but everything kind of looks okay, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. And there's a bit of plastic that broke off from somewhere. So we'll save all the bits and pieces and glue back what we can. Also, let's got the CRT out. I think it's just these two little screws holding it in. And let's see what condition that DAG coating is. I'm expecting that it's in pretty bad shape. Here's the back side of the picture tube. It's most likely the original. It is a Philco 17DRP4. It looks like the wiring hasn't been touched since this was made. This is a type of yoke that does use the hoop, which is making firm contact with the DAG. So even though it's deteriorating around the edges, this is why it's still working so well. And I was thinking it was deteriorating because of the rough shipping, but no, I think it's probably because the set was in a high humidity area at some point because there is some corrosion, because it's coming off all around the edges. So that's most likely an environmental issue. So what am I going to do about it? Well, at some point I'll have to remove all this stuff. Remove at least all the coating that's coming off. Don't eat it, Jupiter. And then spray on some new stuff. I use a product called Slip Plate, which is a graphite spray product. I believe it's used for lubricant, but it's conductive and it works quite well, so that's what I'll be doing. But for now, we are just going to clean it up and reassemble. And hey Jupes, can you move your leg a little bit? Thank you. The steel band that holds this together is a bit corroded, so I'm going to kind of coil this up and put it in some evapor rust while I've got this thing taken apart. And while I'm waiting for that to derust, I will clean up the rest of it. I just glued up that one broken off ear with that same acrylic cement I used before. Applied it with a small brush. I used less this time, so I didn't have any issue with the paint dissolving. There is a hairline crack. It was an awkward thing to clamp, so I basically just press fit it together and held it with my fingers, and within a minute this was on there pretty solidly. So we'll just let that sit. It's be totally invisible anyways. It'll just be covered by the band. But I don't want to do more experimenting with that glue. Now here's something odd. So this is reverse painted all around the entire perimeter. Well, there's one area that looks very strange. It looks like the paint is gone. But it's not. It's slightly separated from the plastic. If you guys can see that, there's a little bit of a crack down there. But it looks so different from the other side. Like there's more damage than there really is. I can kind of push the paint. I mean, the paint is up against the plastic right now. But it looks like there's a chunk gone. Again, luckily that's not very visible. But I was really curious how... What I think is happening is light is coming in from the side where this ridge is, and it's really exaggerating, magnifying the damage, which is a shame. Because you can actually see that bright line. That is light coming through from that raised inner plastic ridge. Okay, what else? Well, I need to clean it, polish it, hopefully get some of these scuffs out. Well, I know I can. That's pretty light surface stuff. And there's one big problem with the screen cover, aside from some dog hair, is this big crack along the top. Now this is the type of damage I am holding out some hope that if I take that plastic solvent and try to wick it in, it'll be less visible. Now, it is reverse painted in this area, and I've come to discover that this solvent will immediately affect the paint. So if I put enough in there to really wick in there, assuming it wicks in there, and that crack goes all the way through, which I'm not sure it does, it could mess up the paint. The crack does come to all the way to the surface, I think, at least in some areas, but I don't know if it does everywhere. So I don't know. I will very gingerly give it a try, but I think, like, when I get down to this area, I think that's internal, and if I just... you can see, when you look on the edge, that crack does not come through to the surface. So if I put a little bead of adhesive on there or solvent, it's not going to wick into it because it just doesn't protrude all the way through. So that's in a pretty visible area. I think it's just something I'm going to have to live with. Yeah, that's just not going to work, unfortunately. I put a little bit of adhesive. Some of it did start to wick in. It did. The crack did become less visible, kind of right in the middle, where it was at its worst. But it won't travel down into the cracks. The solvent sets up too fast. I just put this on a minute ago and it's already completely set up. I think the only way this could possibly work is if the crack was made more extensive. Like break out the entire chunk and then glue it up. And yeah, I know this can work on glass and using pressure helps, but this is a bit beyond my skills at this point with the tools I have at hand. Yeah, it's like I figured. I put a little bit of solvent on a brush and a little bit wicked in the worst part of the crack where it came through the surface, and it kind of started to heal itself a little bit, but it's just not going to work its way all the way down into the cracks. That's why with those windshield repair kits they use pressure. Or suction, but this doesn't go all the way through, so I just don't have the equipment or tools to kind of try to force something down in there, and I don't know if that would work anyways. I suppose heat is another option. That would definitely require some experimentation. I don't want to put a heat gun to this thing by any means, but that's my one other thought that might possibly do some good. But, given the scarcity of these or the value of these, I'm afraid to make it any worse. Not if I had one that was completely trashed, yes, but this one is it's not in a visible area. It's I can live with it. I can live with it. The glue set up overnight. I've done a bit of polishing. I'm going to have to do a little bit of wet sanding here. These scratches are a little too deep to just polish out. The glue did a great job. I actually have to kind of double check to see which ones were actually damaged. And it was this tab broke off on the bottom, and this tab broke off on the top. It's set up very nicely. It seems to be quite strong. Everything seems to line up pretty well now, so aside from the damage I can't do anything about, the stuff I can do something about is all coming together. So I'm going to be putting this back together and putting it aside. And right now, a box just arrived. Let's open it up and see what's inside. Now I'm in the middle of working on several other sets, so I wouldn't normally be opening up this box, except the owner is very anxious to know if it arrived intact. What this is the chassis to a Predicta Continental. Unlike all these other sets I'm working on, this set I'm only going to get the chassis. And he actually removed the main board and sent it to me a few weeks ago, thinking that I would just repopulate the main board and he would put it all back together. Then I got to thinking, well, he might as well just send me everything and then I can do all the work. And I won't have the rest of the set, but I should be able to use one of my other CRTs and speaker and and such, and ensure that it's working. Now, unfortunately, I do already know that the end of the box is caved in. Kind of looks to me like somebody poked their hand through here to use as a handhold to carry it. I'm a little nervous because I think I can feel the chassis poking through. This is a little different from what I was expecting. It looks like there's a backer board that the chassis is mounted on that he included. I thought I would just be getting the metal chassis. I'm not quite sure why he included that. Unless maybe it's because the tuner is mounted on it and he wanted to keep them together. I think things are okay. Luckily there was a lot of foam on this side between that busted open hole and the actual cabinet. Tell you what, when I ship this back, I think I'll use this box as the inner box, and I'll double box it and put a box around it. There's not really much, well, there's no padding on this side whatsoever, and very little on that side. Hopefully everything survived. And here it is. I was wondering what all these bits of paper were. I realized, oh, those were the owner's notes on what wires went to what. For better or worse, I've worked on enough of these that I've pretty well memorized what wires go to what. Oh, this one will be slightly different. For example, I think it may use a tone control. There's an option on all the main boards for tone control. None of the sets we've looked at so far use it, but I think this one might. First thing I noticed was this is very loose. The proper mounting screw is not present, and this is way too loose. Hopefully that didn't get damaged. And I'm not sure what's up with this wire nut. Certainly not original. So wires feel a little bit different too. They're very pliable. I'm used to them being rather stiff and rock hard. Otherwise, yeah, it's same old we've seen. I'm not sure why these are cut off though, because these would go to the board with wires you can untwist, but these were just cut off, and I don't know where the linearity control went to. If I had to guess, the original was no good because the original I think was pop riveted on. It wasn't held by screws, and these screws don't match, so some monkey business has gone on there. This all looks standard. I think that might even be the original fusistor. For those of you who haven't seen, this I believe is what the original Philco fusible resistors look like. It's this coiled up resistance wire inside of the shielding, and makes a nice little handle to pull it out. You don't see these too often. And yeah, there's a tuner. So this board it's mounted on is something I haven't seen before. It looks like it's just a really thick piece of masonite, same like I have on top of my workbench, just about 3 times thicker. And for those of you who don't know, the Continental is the last Predicta model introduced, and it's the rarest and most valuable. I've only seen one in person ever. It had already been claimed at a swap meet, and I've never worked on one. Essentially, it's identical to all the 17-inch models we've been working on, but it has a 21-inch picture tube. And it's a different picture tube. It's only modeled to use a 21 EVP4, which is an improvement over the original 21-inch picture tube that they used. Otherwise, it's identical. I mean, the service info I've been using is identical. In fact, I think they even show on the schematic. Yeah, they even show the schematic I'm using for all these 17-inch sets actually shows a 21-inch CRT as installed. Let's see if they show the tone control on here. Yeah, there it is. That's for the optional tone. So I could actually add a tone control to all these 17-inch models if I wanted to. But of course I'd have to drill a hole in the cabinet or something to mount it, so we won't be doing that. I think this is a good point to break off. I'm going to put this safely out of the way and completely reassemble this set. I removed the rust from the various shielding pieces. I have a little bit more polishing to do on this. We'll get it all back together and then move on. And next up, we'll be getting to Brian's Brown Princess set.